The Galactic Council's chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of energy fields encasing the towering room. Each delegate, representing countless advanced civilizations, sat in holographic seats shaped to their species' liking. At the center stood Aridar, a sleek, amphibian-like Tendarian whose species prided itself on logic and precision. His elongated fingers traced lines on a glowing tablet as he addressed the assembly with a measured, almost condescending tone. "Esteemed members of the Council," he began, his voice resonating through the chamber. "It is with great pride that I report our operative's recent success. During the incursion on Earth, several human juveniles were captured and are now held in our secure research facilities. Their analysis will undoubtedly reveal the key to understanding the erratic and, frankly, primitive behavior of this violent species." Arethar's announcement sent a ripple of murmurs through the chamber. The idea of abducting human children seemed audacious, even reckless, to some. Among the delegates, a diminutive, fur-covered ambassador from the Calithic race leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "Children? They've taken human children?" His voice carried a note of disbelief. "Do they not understand what they've done?" Unfazed, Arethar continued, "We believe this will provide an opportunity to neutralize humanity's unpredictability. The juveniles will be studied, and perhaps their weaknesses can be exploited to bring this volatile race to heel." Across the galaxy, aboard the UNS Resolute, a sleek Earth-built ship orbiting the Moon, Captain Elise Ford reviewed the same information with a very different reaction. Her holographic display lit up with intercepted transmissions confirming the abductions. Her jaw tightened, and her fists clenched the edge of the command console. Around her, the bridge crew of the Resolute shared her fury. "Children," she muttered, her voice like steel scraping against steel. "They've taken our children!" Beside her, Commander Tobias Greer, a burly man with a scar running across his left cheek, slammed his palm onto the console. "This isn't just an act of war. It's personal." Elise nodded, her piercing green eyes blazing. "Damn right it is. They think our kids are weak, that they can poke and prod them for answers. They have no idea what they've unleashed." Down in the detention cells of the Tendarian research facility, the captured children were anything but helpless. Riley, a 12-year-old with an unruly mop of brown hair and a mischievous grin, was already working on her escape plan. She had watched the aliens carefully, noting how they interacted with their strange technology. Next to her, Jamal, a 13-year-old tech prodigy who had been tinkering with gadgets since he could crawl, stared intently at the energy barrier that confined them. "This force field runs on some kind of fluctuating energy pulse," Jamal said, his voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "If we can disrupt the pattern for even a second—" Riley cut him off, her grin widening. "We make a break for it." The other children in the cell, initially terrified, began to rally around the duo. Even the youngest among them, a timid 8-year-old girl named Mia, found courage in their determination. Meanwhile, back on the Resolute, Elise convened her senior officers. The room was tense, but their resolve was unshakable. "We need to move fast," she began. "We know where they've taken them. The Tendarian facility is heavily guarded, but we've faced worse odds before." Tobias leaned forward. "And we'll need to send a message while we're at it. If the Galactic Council thinks they can take our kids without consequence, we'll make them regret that mistake." A younger officer, Lieutenant Isla Chin, spoke up. "Ma'am, the Tendarians might have underestimated us, but they'll expect some form of retaliation. We need to think outside the box." Elise smirked. "That's exactly what we'll do." Back at the facility, Arethar was oblivious to the storm brewing. Confident in his security measures, he observed the children from a monitoring room. "Primitive creatures," he muttered, watching Riley and Jamal whispering to each other. "They're hardly worth the effort." But his confidence was misplaced. Jamal had just finished crafting a makeshift device using scraps from their cell's food dispenser. It hummed softly in his hand, a rudimentary signal jammer that disrupted the energy barrier for a brief moment. That moment was all they needed. The children bolted from the cell, Riley leading the charge like a general rallying her troops. The facility's alarms blared as guards scrambled to contain the escape. The children's courage and quick thinking threw the Tandarians into chaos. Riley found herself face to face with a towering alien guard, but she didn't hesitate. Grabbing a loose metal rod, she swung it with surprising force, knocking the alien off balance. "Never underestimate a kid," she muttered, breathless but exhilarated. Jamal worked frantically to hack into the facility's systems, using alien terminals to disable doors and create distractions. "This isn't so different from home," he said with a grin as lights flickered and corridors locked down behind them. As the chaos unfolded, Elise and her team launched their assault. The Resolute emerged from its stealth approach, and a squad of highly trained Marines deployed to the surface. They moved with precision, neutralizing alien defenses and advancing toward the detention area. The Tandarians, unaccustomed to humanity's aggressive tactics and unpredictability, faltered. Aredar watched in disbelief as his facility descended into pandemonium. "How are they doing this?" he demanded, his composure cracking. By the time Elisa's team reached the detention area, they found the children barricaded in a control room, holding off the Tandarians with improvised weapons and sheer determination. Elise couldn't help but smile. "Looks like they didn't need us as much as we thought." "Captain Ford!" Riley called out, her voice filled with a mix of relief and pride. "Took you long enough." Elise knelt, pulling the kids into a protective formation. "You did good, but let's get you home." As they made their escape, the Tandarians were left to pick up the pieces. Aredar, humiliated and furious, vowed to report this to the Council. But deep down, he knew. They had underestimated humanity, not just their warriors, but their children, their very spirit. On the Resolute, Elise stood on the bridge, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. "They thought our kids were weak," she said quietly. "They thought wrong." Her words hung in the air, a promise and a warning to anyone who dared cross humanity again. In the depths of the Galactic Council's core system, word of the Tandarian facility's disastrous encounter with humans spread rapidly. For the Tandarians, the loss wasn't just a failure, it was an embarrassment. Aredar's once composed demeanor now bristled with fury as he stood before the Council's emergency session. The chamber was filled with whispers of disbelief and judgment. "They breached our defenses!" Aredar exclaimed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Humans, barely a level 2 civilization, destroyed one of our most secure installations and rescued their juveniles." A representative of the Hazkari, a massive insectoid race with a collective hive mind, leaned forward. "Perhaps," the Hazkari delegate chittered, "you underestimated the Deathworlders. They are unique in their resourcefulness." Aredar's glare hardened. "Resourceful? They're savages. This humiliation cannot stand. We must retaliate swiftly to restore order." From the shadows of the chamber, an imposing figure emerged, Varix, a mercenary captain hired by the Council to quell troublesome species. A hulking, reptilian being with scales that glimmered like polished obsidian, Varix carried a reputation for efficiency and brutality. His deep voice cut through the chamber's murmurs. "I've dealt with Deathworlders before. They bleed like any other." The Council agreed, albeit with some trepidation. They dispatched Varix and his elite mercenaries to Earth's orbit, where the Resolute and its crew were still recovering. The humans, unaware of the imminent threat, celebrated their victory aboard the ship. In the mess hall, children swapped stories of their escape, their laughter a stark contrast to the horrors they'd endured. Captain Elise Ford allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction, watching the crew and the rescued children bond over shared triumph. But peace was fleeting. The ship's alarms blared, shattering the camaraderie. Elise sprinted to the bridge, her boots echoing against the metal floor. "Report!" she barked. Commander Greer's face was grim. "Massive ships just dropped out of FTL, mercenary class. They've surrounded us." Elise's jaw tightened. "Open a channel." The main screen flickered to reveal Varix. His reptilian eyes glinted with predatory glee. "Humans," he growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've meddled where you don't belong. Surrender now, or I'll teach you the price of defying the Galactic Council. Elise met his gaze without flinching. We don't surrender, she said coldly. Not to bullies. Not to anyone. Varix chuckled darkly. Brave words. Let's see how long they last. The connection cut, and Elise immediately turned to her crew. Battle stations. They'll expect a straightforward fight. We'll give them anything but. The Resolute sprang to life. Pilots scrambled to their fighters, engineers reinforced the ship's shields, and the children, though ordered to stay in secured quarters, began whispering ideas among themselves. Jamal, ever the tinkerer, said, If we can boost the comm systems, maybe we can send a distress signal back to Earth. In the void of space, the Resolute was outmatched. Varix's fleet dwarfed the human ship in both size and firepower. Yet Elise and her crew fought with a ferocity that caught the mercenaries off guard. They used asteroid fields to evade pursuers, employed hit-and-run tactics, and turned the terrain itself into a weapon. On board one of the enemy's ships, Varix grew impatient. These Deathworlders are slippery, he snarled. Crush them already! Meanwhile, Jamal's plan began to take shape. Using spare parts from the ship's damaged systems, he worked tirelessly alongside Riley and the other children. Despite their youth, their determination was unshakable. If we can hack into their fleet's comm network, Jamal explained, we can turn their own systems against them. Riley grinned. I like the way you think. As the battle raged, the Resolute suffered damage, its shields flickering under relentless fire. Elise's voice echoed through the comms. We're not going down. Not today! The children's plan finally came to fruition. Using their makeshift device, they tapped into the mercenaries' communications. Jamal transmitted a burst of false orders, sowing confusion among the enemy fleet. Ships turned on one another, mistaking allies for enemies. Varix roared in frustration as his fleet descended into chaos. What's happening? He demanded, slamming his clawed fist against the console. Elise seized the opportunity. Focus fire on their flagship, she commanded. The Resolute launched a barrage of torpedoes, striking the heart of the enemy fleet. Explosions lit up the darkness as Varix's flagship took critical damage. Realizing the tide had turned, Varix issued a reluctant retreat. His fleet limped away, battered and humiliated. Back on the Resolute, the crew erupted in cheers. Elise, however, remained somber. This isn't over, she said quietly. They'll be back. The children, though exhausted, beamed with pride. Jamal handed Elise the device they'd built. It's not perfect, he said, but it worked. Elise knelt to their level, her stern expression softening. You're braver than most adults I know. Thank you. As the ship limped back toward Earth for repairs, the crew reflected on their narrow victory. They had survived, but the shadow of the Galactic Council loomed larger than ever. Elise knew one thing for certain: humanity's fight had only just begun. The tendrils of darkness wrapped tighter around humanity's precarious position. Though the Resolute had managed to repel Varix's fleet, the Galactic Council's fury only grew. Word of their defeat spread across the stars, and in their arrogance, the Council declared Earth and its colonies a rogue state, to be eliminated at any cost. Aredar stood before the Council chambers again, his crimson eyes alight with a dangerous gleam. This time, we will not entrust the task to mere mercenaries. The Tendarian Armada will crush these Deathworlders once and for all. Whispers filled the chamber. Some representatives hesitated, their memories still fresh with reports of the humans' cunning and brutality. Yet the Council agreed, their pride demanding swift retribution. A full fleet mobilized, hundreds of warships, carriers brimming with advanced fighters, and hulking dreadnoughts armed with weapons capable of obliterating entire continents. It was a force that had crushed civilizations far older and more advanced than Earth. Meanwhile, on the Resolute, repairs were hastily underway. Captain Elise Ford stood on the bridge, her sharp gaze fixed on the holomap projecting the incoming fleet. We're outnumbered. Outgunned. And we're still limping from the last fight. Commander Greer crossed his arms, his voice steady despite the odds. Then we'll have to do what humans do best, fight smart. The children, once captives but now full members of the crew in spirit, crowded around Jamal's latest project in the engineering bay. If we could hack their fleet comms before, Riley suggested. Why not go bigger this time? Jamal grinned. Way ahead of you. But this time, we're not just scrambling their systems, we're going to hijack them. Elise interrupted their brainstorming session, her tone urgent. We don't have much time. They'll be here within hours. Whatever you're planning, it needs to be ready. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Earth's defense grid activated for the first time in centuries. Space stations armed with rudimentary railguns and missile silos aimed toward the void. Across the planet, people prepared for the unthinkable. Governments broadcast a single message: resist at all costs. The Resolute and a small fleet of hastily retrofitted human ships moved to intercept the Tandarian armada. Elise addressed her crew one last time before the battle. I won't lie to you. Most of us might not make it out of this alive. But if we don't hold the line here, Earth falls. And if Earth falls, humanity falls. Let's show them what it means to fight for home. The armada arrived like a tidal wave of destruction. Tandari dreadnoughts loomed in the distance, their shadows blotting out the stars. Squadrons of fighters swarmed forward, their formation precise and deadly. From the bridge, Elise watched the onslaught. Hold steady, she ordered, her knuckles white as she gripped the console. Wait for my signal. The first wave hit hard. Explosions rippled through the human fleet as ships were torn apart by superior firepower. Yet, the Resolute weaved through the chaos, its pilots exploiting every blind spot and every flaw in the enemy's formation. Jamal's plan began to unfold. With the children's help, he unleashed a virus into the enemy's network, targeting the Tandarians' automated targeting systems. Suddenly, their ships began firing erratically, striking their own vessels in the confusion. On board the Tandarian flagship, Aredar roared in frustration. Find the source of the interference. Disable it now! But the humans weren't done. Using the hack systems, Jamal and his team fed false data to the enemy fleet, leading entire squadrons into traps set by the Resolute and its allies. The battle escalated into pure chaos. Debris filled the void as both sides suffered heavy losses. Elise's voice echoed through the comms, rallying her crew. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for every person on Earth who believes in freedom. The turning point came when the Resolute executed a daring maneuver. Charging directly toward the Tandarian flagship, Elise ordered every remaining torpedo launched at point-blank range. The explosions crippled the massive ship, and Aredar's furious visage appeared on the comms. You insolent Deathworlders! He spat. Do you truly think this changes anything? We will burn your planet to ash! Elise's response was icy. You underestimated us once. Big mistake. As Aredar's flagship began to implode, Varix, still nursing his earlier defeat, returned with a small contingent of ships, hoping to reclaim some semblance of honor. However, upon seeing the chaos and destruction, even he hesitated. You fools! Varix muttered to himself, watching the humans hold their own against impossible odds. You didn't just anger a race. You woke a beast. The battle reached its peak when Jamal's final modification went live. The virus overloaded the Tandarians' reactors, forcing their ships to retreat or risk total destruction. One by one, the armada pulled back, leaving the human fleet battered but victorious. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elise collapsed into her chair, exhaustion finally overtaking her. We won, she said softly, almost in disbelief. Jamal and Riley joined her, grinning despite their fatigue. Told you we'd figure something out, Jamal said. Elise smirked, ruffling his hair. You've got a knack for miracles, kid. The cost had been immense. Dozens of human ships were destroyed, and thousands of lives were lost. But for the first time, the Galactic Council had been forced to acknowledge the strength of humanity. They weren't just survivors. They were fighters. And as the remnants of the Tandarian fleet limped back to Council space, Aredar seethed in his shattered flagship. His pride was gone, but his hatred for humanity burned brighter than ever. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The Tendarian fleet's retreat left a void of silence across the galaxy. On Earth, celebrations erupted in cities, towns, and orbital stations. Humanity had survived the impossible. Yet aboard the Resolute, the mood was far from jubilant. The crew knew the Galactic Council would never let this stand. In the war room, Elise, Jamal, Riley, and Commander Greer pored over the latest intelligence. The Tendarians weren't the only threat. Reports of Council forces regrouping reached them, hinting at an even larger assault. This was no longer about Earth. Humanity had become a symbol of defiance. Elise looked at the holographic display of Earth. If we stay here, they'll come back, stronger and angrier. Next time, we might not be so lucky. Greer nodded. Agreed. We can't keep playing defense. It's time we take the fight to them. The crew exchanged glances. The idea of leaving Earth to strike directly at the Council's heart was audacious, borderline suicidal. Yet, after everything they'd endured, it felt like the only option. Riley leaned forward, her voice small but resolute. They need to know what happens when you mess with Deathwelders. Jamal grinned. I like the way you think, kid. The plan was insane, even by human standards. Using the remnants of the fleet, they would create a diversion near a strategic Council outpost while a covert team infiltrated a key facility, one that housed the Council's central communications hub. If we can disrupt their command structure, Jamal explained, it'll buy us time. They won't be able to coordinate another attack for months. The crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the mission. Volunteers stepped forward, each willing to risk their lives for humanity's future. Among them were the children, who had proven their ingenuity and courage time and again. Riley approached Elise the night before the mission. Captain, I want to help. I know I'm just a kid, but I've got ideas, things the Council won't see coming. Elise knelt to meet her eyes. You've already done more than most adults ever could. But this mission, it's dangerous. If we fail. We won't, Riley interrupted, determination blazing in her gaze. Because we're human. The next day, the Resolute led a small fleet toward the Council outpost. As expected, they were intercepted by a contingent of warships. The battle was fierce, but it was only a distraction. Meanwhile, Elise, Jamal, Riley, and a hand-picked team infiltrated the outpost. Wearing captured Tendarian armor, they blended in, navigating the labyrinthine corridors toward the communications hub. The team moved with precision, using every trick they'd learned during their battles with the Council. Jamal hacked into security systems, disabling cameras and rerouting patrols. Riley, though small, slipped through vents and tight spaces, planting devices that would sow chaos when activated. As they reached the hub, alarms blared. Their presence had been discovered. Elise barked orders, her calm demeanor masking the urgency of their situation. Jamal, get us in. Riley, cover the hallway. The door to the hub opened, revealing a massive chamber filled with consoles and servers. At the center stood a towering alien, a Council commander whose very presence radiated authority. You've come far for Deathwelders, the commander sneered. But this ends here. Elise stepped forward, her weapon raised. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. The fight that ensued was brutal. The commander's advanced technology gave him the upper hand, but humanity's resourcefulness turned the tide. Riley used the devices she'd planted to disable the room's defenses, and Jamal exploited a vulnerability in the commander's armor, leaving him exposed. Elise delivered the final blow, her blade piercing the commander's chest. As he collapsed, he muttered, You don't understand. Even if you win here, the Council will never stop. Elise wiped the sweat from her brow. Maybe not. But we'll make them think twice. With the hub secured, Jamal uploaded the virus, a creation that would cripple the Council's communication network. It was designed not just to disrupt, but to spread, infecting every connected system. As they prepared to leave, the commander's words lingered in Elise's mind. The Council's retaliation would be swift and unforgiving. She knew humanity couldn't afford to wait for the next attack. Back on the Resolute, the crew monitored the chaos unfolding across Council space. Ships lost contact with command, fleets turned on each other in confusion, and entire systems were plunged into disarray. The victory was bittersweet. Humanity had bought time, but at a cost. The crew gathered in the observation deck, watching the stars as they reflected on their journey. Jamal broke the silence. "Do you think they'll ever leave us alone?" Elise shook her head. "No. But that's not the point. We've shown them what we're capable of. We've shown the galaxy that humanity isn't to be underestimated." Riley smiled, her youthful optimism shining through. "And if they come back, we'll be ready. Because we're not just survivors. We're Deathworlders." As the Resolute set a course for uncharted space, Elise made a decision. Humanity wouldn't wait for the Council's next move. They would forge alliances, build defenses, and continue to adapt. The fight for survival wasn't over, but neither was humanity's story. And as the stars stretched before them, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never look at Deathworld as the same way again.